Welcome everyone to the next exciting episode. I got the creators of SYNSOULS ECG and Fatal Factions with me, hitting a hard discussion of the secondary market and how it influences not only TCGs but the indie TCG market as well, and how indie game creators interact with each other. Let's do this.
What were the two topics we were going to go over today?
Yes. So speaking of, our first target is about the secondary market, especially with the indie trading card game or indie card game, however you want to put it. The secondary market for that. And then I even forgot about the second one. The second one is how indie card game designers interact with each other and with the community. I almost forgot about that one.
Got it.
I think that was Brandon's question that he originally posted up.
Yes. And
Brandon,
one
what
of my
is?
questions of the weeks.
Yeah, I think it was one of your questions of the weeks or something. I was like, oh man, this is actually a good question.
That's
Brandon, it is good to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, great to meet you as well, Sir Pocket.
Oh, yes, Brandon Pocket Brandon. We're diving into the secondary market. I'm gonna first let's ask Brandon first. How do you feel about the secondary market, my man?
When it comes to the secondary market, I think it is interesting. It does give a lot of options for people to follow your art and your creation. Definitely will give some money to your Kickstarter campaign if you so happen to start one. But I do also think that there is some people waiting to get those first editions of your cards and possibly resell them to other people at a higher price, especially if you get big.
That's 100% true. How about you, Pocket?
I think that secondary market, especially in terms of card games and indie card games, is an important aspect that will always be there. It's not something you can really divorce from the rest of the scene. I do think that as a metric, I do think some people put far too much or too little stock in. I've seen so many people say, well, so and so Kickstarter game was doing well, but no, now you can get them on the secondary market for cheap, so the game is dead. And I don't think that's a great metric when it comes to indie anything. But I feel like I might be stretching into further topics, so
Oh no, you're definitely right in the ball game, right, Brandon?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, man. Oh no, that's 100% true. I could almost say it. That happened to actually quite a few recent TCGs that tried to do up like a secondary Kickstarter and it wasn't successful and it kind of like literally crashed their whole entire secondary market of their own cards recently.
mhm.
Oh man, yeah, you're
In a
right
way,
about
it
that.
seems like cards can be like a stock market of some sorts. Some people want to sell their game, like here's an entire package or something that you should enjoy with your family and play. But then people take those cards and look at them like, okay, how is the value of this card going to grow over time? And I do think that is sort of increased by the fact that some people, for their first editions, they'll completely, make their cards holographic all the way through. For first edition sets, they'll even start signing their names on cards and pack wraps, because they understand that there is a market specifically for these kind of cards that come in.
I was just going to add to that I think that is a very easy trap that a lot of indie creators fall into is that those kind of like limited edition holos signed cards they see the big companies doing that and they're like, okay, well, as a collector, that's kind of where the dopamine hits when you get that, so I'll have those too. That helps fund your initial game, but when you're selling specifically for that crowd, you're catering towards investors, I feel, more than players and collectors. And then it creates a very dangerous slope.
Yes, exactly.
Incredibly true. So, for example, I don't know if any of you guys follow what other indie TCGs. I figure you guys do. You know, you're indie creators. You most likely follow other indie TCGs as well.
Yep.
One of the more clever group of creators that I've seen in a TCG designer, what they did was it's a Soul Master. Has anybody followed Soul Master TCG by chance or no?
No, not from my end.
No, no. Okay.
I am aware of it, but I assume you're going to know more about it than me since you're bringing it up.
No, it's okay. I know that it's hard to keep track of over 100 indie TCGs that are currently out there right now, right? Even if it's like an
Hmm.
HTCG or vice versa or indie, there's just, I can guarantee 100. And I keep on hearing people like, oh, I wasn't making a game before, I'm making a game now. And you're like, what? It just keeps on adding up after a while. It's just, oh, there's so many games out here now. It just keeps on evolving to more and more and more. So yeah, it's an ever expanding archive for my side. But yeah, so Soul Masters, what they did was they actually, instead of just going out and doing like the game first initially and everything, they did like an art series. They paid themselves. They shipped out like this small little art series, like this little box, and it's got like four packs in it. And it wasn't just foils. There were like super nice, really nice texture foils with like insignias in the middle, or like shattered glass effect, or even like raindrop or puzzle piece effect. And they just
Mm.
shipped it out for free. They found a few content creators. I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of them. And then, we just started pumping out content for them and stuff. And then they sent us like few samples of the foiling card, of like the actual like limited print run of the actual game itself, cards that you could play. And then they had like 64 of a specific staple type card for the game, I'm pretty sure. Can you tell me that the art series cards alone sell to between $25 to $35 a pop now within just a couple months, and that actually the foil single cards, like the limited set of the single set of the actual cards that you play in the game, sell between 40 to 50 a pop now?
Hmm.
Uh, well, it makes sense why people want to grab those and resell them. It definitely would increase the economy behind those cards. So
Exactly. So I'm just like surprised. And they have already got like the gameplay set out, and the rule, they actually have a rule book already set up. They're actually working on the video, and they're fine tuning a few things already with the actual gameplay game itself. And they have like this little plan and everything. So I think it's really interesting that they did that, because I haven't seen only one other TCG do something kind of similar to that, which is rather interesting, is like Alpha Clash. You guys heard of Alpha Clash, right? I'm pretty sure.
mm,
Yes.
Right. So before they even started with the actual game itself and release of the game, right? They started off with what? A graphic novel beforehand. So that was like their first thing that they did on Kickstarter, was a graphic novel. Then they did the TCG itself. And then to bring it up the third Kickstarter, they didn't do another set on Kickstarter. They did the light novel on Kickstarter. So they used other methods to go back up on Kickstarter to try to get more attention and more grab on the game. But they use other outlets to get people first interest in the game and then start reeling people in. And I think that's a clever tactic that both of the games have used so far to actually reel people in. I mean, this is just my own personal opinion for the secondary market,
Mhm.
just, recently.
yeah, I do think that's genius. I mean, there's reasons why, Lorcana, everyone knows about Lorcana. Um, there's a bunch of other games, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, they all have some animes or books or something that surround them. So by the time that people get into it, they're like, oh, Jafar, I love Jafar. And then, that's all of a sudden they're getting more packs and more cards. Like, there's a reason that I think a lot of card games that succeed with licenses succeed because, they're established licenses. As where, people that don't start, they usually die out pretty quickly. And even then, it's not a guarantee. I think the Star Wars, except for the new Star Wars game coming out, Star Wars cards from the previous generations, Warcraft cards from previous generations, they all died out because they didn't have the total encompassing books and videos and all these other things. They just have, oh, it's a game. Okay. And then now it's a card game. Well, I know it from the game, maybe not much else. So,
I do think that having other media definitely helps you as a franchise. I also see the other side of it where I see these content creators, or these indie creators wanting that, wanting this media franchise and going all out from the beginning, getting in way over their heads. Alpha Clash, has a really solid team that has people that have worked in these fields. And then, I see indie creator A who thought up this really cool game. He's, fresh out of high school. We wish him all the luck. But if he starts talking about these plans and he's going to launch, a card game and then a comic series and it's going to become an anime, and it's like, you need to tone it back a bit. Because when you start planning for all that stuff without the resources, you are setting yourself up for failure.
yeah, absolutely.
That is actually the typical reaction that a lot of people do have. Yeah, that was a very good way to put it. Like how Alpha Clash did it, graphic novel. Like, oh, that's cool, story and everything, card game, and then it levels up. And they don't really mention their other plans, right? But then when you're like, yeah, a card game, I have this, and an anime, then everybody's like, hold it, pedal back, boy. You have to finish one first before going to the next. You're like, ah. And it's like, yeah, that's typically the reaction from everyone in the community.
I also feel that when it comes to other projects, this is not a knock on Alpha Clash in particular, but just because we've been bringing it up. I've always had mixed opinions when companies use Kickstarter as a way to find an audience. I've always felt that that was a bit disingenuous, and I'm not explaining this well. If they already have your audience, like Alpha Clash had the graphic novel and then their card game, and obviously as a company you want to expand. But I feel that once you're launching new products, then through similar means is not necessarily the point of sites like that. And this is definitely more of a personal opinion that people definitely have opinions on. I know whenever I see that, it always feels like if you have your audience and you want them, to get more products, you have your audience's attention already. This doesn't feel like how you should be advertising. That's always just how I felt about it.
Okay, point to bring up. Brandon, how do you feel about this?
I don't know. I feel like I could talk about it all day, but I want to hear your opinion on this one.
Who, me? Oh, well,
Yeah.
okay, to be 100% square, a lot of my opinions about things have changed after moving to Thailand. And the reason why that is not, we don't have always access to every single website that other people have access to. Things are run differently here, obviously, and sometimes, and we do have the availability to get through Kickstarter. Some days, depending on situations, I can't really be too totally specific about certain things, but like for some reason, I could go months without having Facebook, but my wife with her Thai phone can use it. But with my international phone, I don't have access to Facebook. I don't have access to certain social media sites. It's really weird how it happens. And some people say, oh, it's just a hiccup or something like that, or it could be just kind of done intentionally. I really don't know. But my phone is kind of old, but it still can run. Like I could use Facebook now, but there for a while, about 2 months, I couldn't use it. Everything I would do with it, it just would not allow me to access it. But one thing that's been strictly always dependent Kickstarter. And for me, I do see the point behind people, especially creators. I mean, this is just from this point of view. Sometimes
Mhm.
we only have, if it's international customers, not strictly saying US people or like, people on the North and South American side, but people in other countries don't have full access to certain things. And then having the different levels. Yes, unfortunately, Kickstarter was supposed to start up a business, but now I've noticed they kind of changed their wording is to start up each product that comes out. For us, sometimes it's easier to, especially for payments and stuff, right? Sometimes you don't have PayPal, sometimes you don't have a credit card. Kickstarter gives a couple different options for people to get things. So I do see the point that there's some people who could only get stuff through Kickstarter, if you know what I mean. Like that's kind of like
Yeah.
how I see it. That's just me.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about like currency translation or anything like that because Kickstarter or Indiegogo will do that for you, right? They'll make sure that your currency translates to whatever new currency that you're trying to bring it to. I do think it's unfortunate though that Kickstarter can sometimes take a bit. I think I was looking at Kickstarter myself. If I remember correctly, they'll take 10 to 20% of whatever entire funds that you can um, garner as long as you meet your goal, and then they take it after the fact, which can mess with people. And then also on top of that, marketing can be a little strange too, because like you said, there's some people, they don't have TikTok in their country, or maybe they're not, Instagram isn't available. So any of your ad revenue you put into that just sort of disappears. And I've heard plenty of horror stories about Kickstarter. And even after reaching their goal, they're still not able to fulfill a lot of things that their customers are asking for. So my opinion is, trying to get those mediums to all the customers out there is great, but I think you have to be careful with it and make sure that you're sending it out to the places that your people are actually at. Do some of the market research.
Let's say it was really interesting to hear perspective from someone in Thailand. 'Cause obviously, well, I won't say obviously. I'm in America. I don't know where you are, Brandon.
Oh,
Hey, America.
yeah, he's in
Okay,
US too.
so well, we do try to, do that market research and be aware. That is not something that I normally think about. So that was, really interesting to hear perspective from someone who doesn't have full internet access. And it does remind me once that there was a member of my community who mentioned that they weren't able to access my site from their location. It was just not something that had crossed my mind in setting up a site. That's not something I encounter, and it's not something that you just think about until it's brought up. So I think that is a very interesting perspective to hear from.
It might be a different conversation, but it is hard as a creator to have to think outside of your creation box. You once you start thinking about, okay, where am I marketing to? Where am I allowing my players to come from so they're not going to be limited? Even accessibility issues. I didn't realize that one of my games would have such an issue with, the colors that I chose for some of my symbols, because they were colorblind. So getting out of your creation box and into marketing accessibility, it can be tough. So if there's more options out there for us, it'll probably be better.
Oh my gosh, I never thought about the colorblind thing. You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Oh, I
it's
just
so strange.
realized that
Oh my
myself.
gosh.
Yeah, I'm
Then
just
you
like,
feel like you've really pushed away a part of your audience because you haven't thought about it and you're not really trying to. It's just you're already balancing your cards, creating lore, creating the cards themselves, trying to find out what frames and logos fit the kind of game you're trying to make. So all those things, and then all of a sudden, oh no, colorblind, or if someone has a hard time seeing really small letters in your cards, more so than other people, like that's a whole different story. So that may
oh
be a
yeah.
different conversation.
Oh yeah, not everybody's like the Yu-Gi-Oh players who read the tiny little text box and be like, here's this little paragraph here I have to read here. Okay, yeah, it does this, 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 and this. And you're like, what?
Yeah, you have to pause the game and read the whole text.
Yeah, for that specifically, I have the benefit of my best friend. One of my best friends is colorblind, so that's
Oh, nice.
accidental testing for me. Uh,
Whoa.
Lucky
but the big companies, they have entire teams dedicated for just thinking about these things.
Exactly.
Whereas for indie content creators, it's you're not thinking about it until someone comes to you and says, "Yeah, this is a problem." You're like, "Oh, well, crap. What do I do about that? What can I do about that?"
It's a accessibility specialist, right? Or something, some title
Yeah.
of that sort. Yeah.
Because I've been there in the seat, trying to create a game and stuff too. Because you're thinking like, does the game mechanic sound work? Does the frame look good? You're thinking about completely different things. And then when
Yeah.
you go into marketing, then you're like, you think about some points, but man, even for myself, I would have never thought about the colorblind thing. I teach kids at school, and I know when to use red pen or write our reports. You don't write our reports in red pen. You write in black or blue because they're colorblind. I never thought about that for the cards. And speaking of, this is kind of on the similar same talk, secondary market and stuff. For us international people too, it's a bit tough sometimes to be like, yeah, we want that card, but it takes 30, what's my exchange rate now? 35 of Thai baht to equal $1, which is almost like half of my paycheck just to get this one card. Where in the US, it was like
Hmm.
1 week's of work was like, I could get this card now and then still have money for rent and everything else. So, that's
Shipping's probably
another
free
thing.
for you too.
Oh, shipping's an absolute nightmare. I have
Yeah.
terrifying dreams. That and customs. Customs are rough here. It depends on who's checking my package. It's like, sometimes the package will come through, not harmed. Sometimes it's ripped open, retaped up, and shipped back out, and the cards are a mess everywhere. And I'm like, what the hell, guys?
International shipping is a nightmare on all sides. I still think it's funny still that by default, the Kickstarter and the different adjacents by default still kind of like make sure to include expected shipping fees in your goal. And I'm like, if I did that, this goal would be unattainable. Like I don't think people understand how much international shipping is these days.
Yeah, it is crazy. And I think that's another way of Kickstarter just tricking content creators or people who want to sell on Kickstarter. Like, yeah, because they'll get, if it's included, if the shipping's included with the goal line, like you said, then that's more money in their pocket. What was it, 10 or 20% that they take on top of the cake?
Yeah, I
Oh yeah.
want to say it's like 12% and then whatever your local tax is.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Oh, that's way too much. Yeah, no. I heard Indiegogo is like the new one. Indiegogo, and there's another one that everybody was talking about trying to sell their product on. I can't remember at the moment.
Another one that my team had been looking at was Game Found.
Game Found. That's it.
Game Pound. Yeah, or GoFundMe, I guess if you really are desperate.
Oh man, nobody should ever put a game under GoFundMe. People will look at it and
Yeah.
feel like they'll just disown the person, and then the whole community will never look back at them. They'll have to change their name, profile name, how they look, get surgery. Then come back into the game and go, "Hey guys, I'm new around. This game's similar to this other game, though."
Yeah, this is my friend's game.
So I guess in the end of this question, do you think the secondary market really dictates a TCG success or not?
Gonna go first, Pocket.
Do I think it dictates? No, I think it can. Oh boy, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here.
Help influence?
I was going to say, so just so Pocket can gather his thoughts. I think
Yeah.
if you put the dependency of the success of your game completely on something like Kickstarter or funding from third parties, it might, because they all want to cash in on that possibly resellable awesome card, right? But if you're dictating your success on how many people actually play it, maybe you put it on a mod on Tabletop Playground or Tabletop Simulator or something. If that's your margin of success, then the money part of it from that secondary market doesn't matter as much. But yeah, if you're going Kickstarter, if you're trying to break into big market, I think it will have a decent impact at the very least.
I could definitely agree with that. I think phrase a different way. What I think Brandon is saying too is, yeah, if you're marketing to collectors and investors, then yes, the secondary market plays a pivotal role. If you're more towards players and collectors, not as much. Yes, I always feel like collectors is the middle ground. Collectors can be players and investors, and they can also just, collect what they like with not necessarily regarding the value. Or investors are only there to make money, and players are there to play the game. Well, the secondary market can help people get their hands on the game easier, which can help players. I think it's far more important when you get over towards collectors and investors.
I have to agree with all the opinions said here, just because you could divide it into factors, right? You could literally break it down. You could probably make an Excel sheet of it, breaking down factors, different ways, different methods, pros and cons of it all. But I have to agree with both. Harry Mark can have a need behind that with a third. I feel like there's no total like rights or wrongs when it comes to this subject. So it's kind of like, yes, it does, and a little bit no, it doesn't. Now, what was
Mhm.
our second question?
Game designer interactions with each other in the community.
I'm pretty sure you both have a lot to talk about this. Who would like to go first?
I started off the first question, so Brandon, why don't you take it?
Yeah, so I think Aruka knows just as much as I do that based on our previous conversation and the previous podcast, I had quite a bit to say about it. And I think the unfortunate truth is that people come to the indie card communities with different intentions. I think most of the time, a lot of people are very, very excited to be working on their card game and let the world know about it. So the initial reaction is, here's my card game, here's all my art, here's all my lore. But because people can be, self-focused on what they're doing, I mean, they are sitting there and creating all these frames and cards, like we said earlier. They have a lot going on. They might not have the time in the day to stop and check out your website and your Instagram and all the stuff happening there. And when people meet that initial reaction of, oh, no one's responding to my art that much, or I'm getting one or two likes, then sometimes they'll drop off the face of the earth and leave the Discord channels or leave the communities, and just keep working in silence maybe. But I think when people evolve beyond that initial reaction from joining into a community, then they will sort of integrate with, okay, what mechanics are you utilizing for yours? Oh, you have like an extra deck mechanic like mine has. How do you utilize yours? And then at that point, I think once you get beyond yourself in a community, then it gets better. But I think a lot of the time, the first 70-80% of the time you're in a community, it can be, here's my stuff, here's my stuff. Oh, you don't care enough, I'm leaving.
And it could be overwhelming, especially because sometimes when you drop off a lot of stuff and then you can hear everybody's reactions, right? Sometimes you hear 10 different people say 10 different things. And that could get also overwhelming because everybody's got their own individual opinion about things.
That's exactly it. And the issue I also find is that I think it's just because it's online community sometimes. The worse your game is, the more you're going to hear about it. But if you have like a really good game, you probably won't get much feedback. I wouldn't say that people like to go out of their way and say, "Oh, this is an amazing game, great work." You know, you might get a couple of those, but it won't be as often as the people that say, "Oh, your frame is horrible. Why do you have so much bleed? What's happening with the art? Are you just going to do stick figures, or are you going to steal AI art, or what is going on exactly?" And you'll have a lot more people that say things that you should try to improve instead of saying, "Oh, how great the game currently is."
Yep. As with a lot of communities, negativity has a louder voice. Completely agree with Brandon. There's a lot of people that come into these spaces really proud of what they have, and sometimes it's their first project. Sometimes it's really easy to forget that. I don't, you don't want to coddle these people and lie to them and say, "Oh, that's great," if it's not. But you also don't gotta be, beating them in the head with it because we want to see the space evolve, and sometimes that starts from nothing. And I do think that the community could be more nurturing overall. At the same time, to go to the other side of it, sometimes creators need to know when their product is not ready to show off. Like if you don't have anything actually concrete, or especially if you can't take criticism, or if you're not ready to take criticism, as exciting as it can be, you probably should just hold off before you come to the table. I
100%.
think that applies to anything online.
Yeah, pretty much.
Whew, yeah, now that's a whole nother subject. That's definitely something to wrap into, probably in a different episode, or maybe even later this one if we have the time. That introducing your game's one thing. How to put it? Have you put out like an idea? And have you ever just wondered that another card creator goes, "Hey, I came up with this idea and stuff," but it's like I said it recently and I said I might do it, but now you're saying using it for your game. Has that happened to you guys, or have you seen that happen in any of the communities that you've been around in?
It has not happened to me. I feel that I have seen it, but not like for more generalized ideas. Like I've not seen any super specific examples, but I don't doubt that they're out there. And it is a fear that I have, honestly, as a content creator, whereas I hold a lot towards my chest until I'm ready to show it off because I do have that. We are all in a melting pot of designs and ideas. And as much as, we do want to help the community grow, it's also our game. There's still a competitiveness, I guess, to it. You're attached to your game, and seeing that get away from you, seeing someone else take that thought that's really scary thought, and that can make it hard to go out and show off what you have because once you have something out there, people can take it and do what they will with it. If they take it after you've already established yourself, it's not nearly as big of a deal. At least it doesn't feel like it to me. But if someone takes it before you have a chance to actually do anything with it, that's just an awful feeling. There are bad actors out there, and there are also people that don't realize they're doing it. There can be people that play the game and like, wow, that's really fun. I could do something like that for my game. And, I understand that comes with the best intentions. And, well, you want to be supportive of that. At the same time, it's really easy to get defensive and like, yeah, but that was my thing. And especially when originality is so hard in this field right now. Like, most of what could be done has been done in some way.
Yeah, that's true. I think the scariest part of that is a lot of your game ideas that you can't really copyright or trademark them or anything. You can, copyright your symbols, your logos maybe, but when it comes to the actual ideas of a game, it is really hard to successfully trademark and keep it for yourself completely. So it can be easy to get that stolen from. Being a part of like the board game and card game community for a little while now, I do find that not many people will outright steal your idea, I don't think. I think it's because a lot of the people that would fund your game or help you get your game to completion in a public market are the people that are also making games themselves. So the minute you steal an idea and other people know about it, you're pretty much shunned from the community. I think a lot of people are good at keeping to their ideas because they have a lot of pride about their ideas and stuff. One thing I will say I have experienced, though, especially in the trading card areas, is a version of your idea is probably already out there in some other way. You really have to go into more granular parts of your game, right? For example, one person will have a game of like, oh, I have lanes in my game, and you have to use resources or mana to summon your people. Well, half of the card games out there utilize resources or mana in some way, similar to maybe Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone. So if you're basing your idea simply on that, you're going to find a lot of people that have the exact same thing. But if you say, oh, I have like a resource-based game where you can destroy cards from your main deck to create more resources or something like that, well, then that's more of a unique twist. That's something that not a lot of people have. And sure, you can't really keep that idea completely to yourself. Another person's at some point in time is probably going to think of that idea, but at least you'll have, a unique staple in an already established part of the market.
It's true. Or even like, for example, using your hand size, right? Like you'd only summon certain things out depending on the hand size you got too. Which is
Yes,
very
yes.
interesting. I get exactly where you're coming from. And it's interesting when it comes to game design and everything and helps influences and stuff. I really do enjoy both of you guys' opinion about like, no, you don't really think, because it's true. If somebody did really try to like, oh, I stole this, right? We're in a society now that really goes after people right by the throat, even through if it's
Mhm.
online. They're like, "Ah, get you." It's cool to hear that that isn't happening. I know when I was trying to do it a few years back, like with my friends and stuff, it was definitely a big thing at the time. There's bigger communities now. Everybody's a little bit more tight knit, especially after like Kickstarter and the pandemic and everything. Like everybody was hunting down certain people who are not dealing out their Kickstarter. Like some people didn't receive their product. So it's kind of like the same thought process. People will be going after people trying to like steal concepts and stuff like that. So it's good to hear that the community is actually thriving and that nobody's really trying to do those kind of shenanigans. And then like, interacting with other game creators on top of it, like have you met anybody where you're just like, wow, I really like their game? Is there anybody you want to give a personal shout out to? Or like, I know everybody loves their game, right? Their one that they created. But it's like, sometimes you find a game, you're like, damn, that's actually really good. I like that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm gonna give my shout out to Levi,
Mhm.
Ars Ex Grimoire, one of my favorite card games of all time right now. Big ups to him.
There are a few that come to mind I've been keeping an eye on and have been really appreciative of their work is KDO for Railgrind.
Battleground, yes.
I always want to be more involved in the community. It's something that I struggle with for personal reasons, but there's always also a fear for me that, the more I play these other people's games, as much as I want to go out and give that support, since my game is also in that malleable state right now, I kind of always worry about the opposite of what we're talking about, that I'm accidentally going to be influenced by these other games. And start taking from them, and that I don't want to do that. But that fear also somewhat stops me from checking out more games that I'm sure I would enjoy. And I was wondering, Brandon, if you've ever felt that way at all.
I will be honest, I don't think I've felt that way in terms of people towards me or me towards others. I feel like once I have an idea, I will fully form it in the vision that I have made it first. And then I might try to look at other games, not for inspiration, but really just to make sure that if there's anything that's been like cutting edge or something in terms of like a shortcut or a way of implementing a kind of card, assuming I have something like it, I would at least understand like, okay, this makes this kind of game genre like a lot more enjoyable. I'll use an example of one of my games was like a roguelite game that I made, and I haven't played a single one myself. But then I decided like, you know what, I need to compare it with like something that's like the best of the genre and see if there's anything I could learn from it.
Hmm.
So I got Slay the Spire, which is a very great
Good game.
indie card game. That's yeah, exactly
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't really like to steal ideas or anything. I realized how different my game was in my own vacuum because I had just sort of kept it to myself and made it in my own image. But I did see a couple of shortcuts of like, oh, this is like how they a couple of unique cards that make up their warrior card. I wouldn't use it that way, but I could see how the play style of the warrior should be more fierce in this way with a sacrifice life for damage kind of situation or something, because people that play warriors tend to like tankier, lower your life is the higher the damage you do kind of situations. So it's not really specific to the Slay the Spire. It's maybe more specific to RPGs in general, but you can learn some things like that from other games of the same genre.
Oh man, like D&D or something like that. Like using the
Yes.
all the different archetypes and references to help, like, how would I build this? And methodically, like, build a card.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that's the perfect description, is use it as a reference and not as a complete inspiration or a copy and paste into your game. Just purely use it as a reference. I think that's the best way to do it.
I suppose put in a more broader aspect, because I get definitely what you're saying, and that is important to be aware of other games in the space and kind of like what the norms are. I suppose another way to put it is more than being scared that I take something from them, because like you said, once you have your game pretty set, you're not looking to overhaul it completely and like, oh, they just did it better. That's just a different game. I suppose more what I meant was like to use your example, Slay the Spire, and seeing how, okay, in general, this is kind of what would be expected out of, this class, like the tanks or the warriors. I guess I worry sometimes that my untainted vision, if you will, before getting into the rest of the space, going to change too much if like I'm not careful by looking like, okay, well, this is how everyone else is doing it. But at the same time, I worry that I don't want to necessarily do it how everyone else is doing it. And there's definitely moderation there, because if expectations are there, you're going to alienate people if you just break from that completely. You also don't want to lose the originality in your own ideas. And I guess that's where I struggle. Is I worry that if I'm not careful, that I could definitely fall into that. Aruka is actually aware of this. To give an example, we recently had to change some things for Sin Souls to make them more accessible, but it was a big struggle with our team because we had to tone down some of the uniqueness from the game to do that, and that was something we struggled with for a long time
Oh, I
because we
see.
didn't want to sacrifice our identity of the game, but at the same time, we couldn't be alienating and blocking players because of that.
oh no, it was over actually the card text, right, and how you written things out, right? The game, I like the game's original text because it was very beautiful. It made the game truly unique, like you said. But they had to make it more generic for players to understand like what these actual like key terms were, and kind of like what all of the other card games. It's like, oh, I know this term means to do this.
So symbologies in text to make sure that there's a likeness. So if they transfer from one game to another, they could still utilize the same terms to play your game. Is that right?
But yeah, in this specific example, yeah.
Yeah.
I gotcha. I'm not sure if I had felt that kind of fear much myself, honestly. But I think in a similar vein, I do fear that some aspects of my game would be a worse version of something else. I think I used the warrior example from Slay the Spire. I would hate for them to play the warrior there. I'm like, oh, there's so many cool flaming sword abilities or whatever. And then they play my warrior in my game and they realize, oh, this is just there's no combos, there's nothing that separates it or helps it at all, you know. So I think it's similar, but it's a little bit of different fear from what I feel on my games.
Okay.
Oh.
I can understand that though. I think that's perfectly normal concern.
Oh yeah, no, it's really cool to hear actually two different fear perspectives from both creators, honestly. Uh,
Sure.
Yeah.
there was a recent topic, and I do want to make this more of a topic discussion later. Is lore important? This kind of goes back to the secondary market. This also comes back into like, communicating with creators and stuff. You guys talk a lot about lore. There's a very huge divided opinion, I think, about that. Like some people think lore is very important for a card game to have, and some of them clearly are like, no, we don't need lore for a game. We just want to play the game. Like, what do you guys think? I know since both of you guys' card games have
Ooh.
unique themes and lore behind it.
If you don't mind, I wanted to talk first. So I think you touch on two sort of funny subjects. If you were to just talk about lore on a flat level, I think that's one discussion. But you brought up the secondary market, and the minute you take the secondary market into account, the lore does, in a funny way, change things. Like there's a reason the Charizard card is so damned expensive, right? Right? Like that's the starter from Generation One. That's the one that a lot of people have more nostalgia towards. Like if you were to have a card about Darth Vader, because of the
Oh,
lore or the story behind that character
hmm
alone, it would be 5 times more expensive than any kind of Leia or any other card that's in the same game, right? So, yeah, lore in terms of secondary market, definitely an interesting subject. But if I were to just look at the lore alone without taking what people love about a character in mind, I would say, and a lot of people have said this in a couple other communities this past week, since I had a conversation as well with some people. Lore is one of those things where if they're already involved with the game or they already love the game, then it's a nice little addition. It definitely helps love the game some more. But if it is going to get people in the door to play the game, no.
I agree with most of that. I also do think there's a big difference to like Pokemon or Star Wars, where absolutely Charizard and Darth Vader, they have that recognition, and I almost feel like it's more of a recognition than a lore thing. Obviously, within the lore, yeah, when comparing within itself, absolutely Darth Vader's Darth Vader. But I don't know how much that necessarily transfers over to indie creators because for me, obviously, it's my characters. I know them. I have had 6 years of history with them. But
Exactly that.
if
Yeah.
I'm showing, Joe Bob Jim over here and telling them about them, I can tell him that this character is more important than this one. But to them, the only thing they really have to draw on is like, all right, well, this one looks kind of cool. This one's
Their
power up
ability is
seems
awesome.
better. Yeah, they don't have the oh snap, that's Darth Vader. To them, that's maybe 10 years down the line, if if Sentinels does take off, and that would be amazing, that would apply. But right now, I feel like where we are and where you start as indie creator, I don't think it applies as much. That said, I do think lore is important. I just don't know. I don't feel as much for the secondary market as with more established IPs.
Yeah, agreed. I do
agree.
think a bonus about lore could be if you chain your lore into the way that the game plays, then I think that would make a lot more sense of the rules and sort of connect. Oh, why can you only summon one creature at a time? Well, if there's a lore reason behind it, then it's sort of like, oh, that's a cool little tidbit about why the rules are limited to let me only summon one creature, you know.
I was just gonna agree too. I don't know if it was you or Brandon that I had the conversation with, or another creator. It kind of mixes up after a while. About kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh, where it's like the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh, you watch it and how they play the game. You're like, yes, we can play the game like that. You get the instruction manual. Like, what the hell is this? You
Yep.
get the actual
Yeah.
text. You're
That
like,
was
this
that
isn't
was
how we
us.
play. And you still play it like you watch it in the show. Ha ha! I pull up blue eyes without attributing anything. Straight to the field.
Yeah, 20 pot of greets.
Yes.
I do want to add that I am all for lore. I hope my previous point did not cloud that up.
Absolutely, yeah.
I understand where that group of lore doesn't matter coming from, and I feel like that opinion is more widely held by other people in the community also making their own games where they do kind of as you mentioned earlier, it's going to be other creators supporting other creators and they want to play the game but they don't have time to get invested in 100 different worlds that may never
Yes.
get expanded. So I can understand that 100%. All that said, a large part of the reason that me and my team are making this game is to share the lore and stories that we already have. So it's obviously very important to me. And if I am able to share even a fraction of that with the community, then I think we'll have succeeded.
Yeah, and that's your basis of success, right? Is making sure that the lore is enjoyed by many. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
one point you had said was someone was making a graphic novel or a comic or something. I forget what game we're talking about, but in moments like that, lore I think is absolutely important and very strong towards your game because you're bringing in people based specifically on your lore that you put inside of your book or your comic or whatever you're making. So in those cases, lore is much, much more valuable. But to the point I said earlier, I think a lot of creators realize lore is for the people that enjoy the game currently, or if they're coming in from books, then for them as well. But if you're expecting the depth of your stories about Jim Bob or something to bring people into the door as a new customer, that might not be it might not do as you hoped. Ultimately, the recognizability or mechanics or something, or the great gameplay or reviews will do that. But the lore is there for people to stay around and enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think jumping on what you said too, Brandon, about when the lore and the mechanics complement each other. I think that is really important because when you got someone coming over from like Alpha Clash with their graphic novel, if you got someone coming in from enjoying these characters or this lore, that's not necessarily going to be enough because the crossover between people that like reading comics and people that like playing games is not as high as some people think. Like trading cards, as much as it's very important to us, it's still such a niche thing altogether. And the crossover with any one other form of media is never great. So when you can incorporate that lore into the mechanics, I think it's that much easier and that much better to get people, fans of other media related to yours into the card game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I have to agree with all of it. This is definitely, man, I didn't realize how much camo is opening up. That's a whole nother topic. Oh, I guess we could dive way more into this. But unfortunately, I think we're officially out of time. I want to thank you both deeply for coming on to this and joining me on this adventure. Thank you both. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Pocket.
Yeah, no,
Thank you
thank
for
you
having
for
me.
having us.
Truly, thank you both for taking the time to join in on this, and can't wait to talk to you guys more about things then later, and hopefully we could do another one. Seriously, it would be great if you guys enjoyed this a lot. It would be nice to have you guys back on again.
I'd
Absolutely.
be
Definitely
happy to
looking
be
forward
back
to it.
on in the future.